Hello, this is Mr. Mola with lesson 5-2, solving systems of linear equations by substitution. All right, so kind of as I said as the last video, so you'll have three options on how to solve by the time we're done with this. So last time we did graphing, this time we're doing substitution, and then next time we'll do elimination. I will tell you substitution is probably my least favorite of the three. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's just I wouldn't really use it unless things are set up perfectly for substitution. I like elimination the best. I think I said that in the last video too. All right, so substitution, okay, is kind of what it sounds like. You're going to substitute things in. So if Mr. Molo is gone for a day, there'll be a substitute teacher. Someone will come in and do my spot. So the first thing we need to do when we substitute, we need to make one or both of the equations either say x equals or y equals. Most of the ones in your homework will already be set up for you, but there will be a couple where I'm going to make you do some work that they're not set up for you that'll look like A, B, and C here. So it says x plus y equals -7 or -5x plus y equals 5. So none of them say x equals, none of them say y equals. With a couple steps though, we could make this top one say x or y equals pretty easily. So let's look at that. So if I'm trying to, let's say, solve for x, so I want to get the x by itself, that means I'm going to subtract y from each side. So now I have it to say x equals -y minus 7. So if the book ever says, oh, make this say x equals, that's what you would do, okay? Now let's pretend the book asks you to solve for y, and it'll say y equals. Well, now I want to get the y by itself, so I'm going to subtract x from each side. So now I'm left with y equals -x minus 7. So you see how we kind of switch those things around. Now this one says y equals. Now this bottom equation is a little different. Getting y equals is going to be pretty easy, but getting x equals because of the -5 is going to be a little more difficult. So that's probably not one I would ever have to do or want to do. So I don't think you have to do any of those in the homework. So let's make this one say y equals. So now it's a -5x. So I'm going to add 5x to each side. So I have y equals 5x plus 5. So now the y is by itself. It says y equals. Again, to get it to say x equals probably wouldn't be as easy because then I have to subtract y and then divide by -5. So it's 2 steps. If you ever have something like that that's 2 steps, I would probably look for a different method. So like for looking at b here, okay, there's one equation that we can get to say x or y equals pretty easily. So stop and think for a second. So it's going to be this first equation. So this first equation, because the x is by itself, it's not like a 6y or 3x or a 2y, we can get that x by itself pretty easily. And so x, we want it by itself, so I'm going to add 6y to both sides. And now this equation says x equals 6y minus 11. Okay, so this is our first step for every problem. We have to make sure at least one equation says x or y equals. Okay, we'll do one more and then we'll look at some problems. So 4x plus y equals -1 and 3x minus 5y equals -18. Again, this bottom one, since it has a 3x and a -5y, not going to be very easy to get it to say x or y equals. But this top equation, since it has a 4x plus y, and it's just a regular y there, we can get that to say y equals pretty easily just by subtracting 4x from each side. So now my problem is set up. It says y equals -4x minus 1. Okay, so that would be your first step, getting each equation to say x or y equals. It's up to you which one it says. Okay, so if we look at a couple of these here, if you look at the first three, all of them say x or y equals. It changes from each one, but that doesn't really matter as long as it says x or y equals. So this first one says y equals. This second one says x equals. This third one's kind of weird. It just says x equals y. So as long as they say one of the variables is equal to each other. So this is where that substitution comes into play. We see I have 2 y's in these two problems. I have one y right here, and I have one y right here. And y are really the same thing. They're both y's, right? So I'm going to substitute in y, or substitute out y rather, and I'm going to put in this 5 plus x. So I'm going to keep the 2 there, but I'm going to take out that y, and put in 5 plus x, because that's what y equals. Y equals 5 plus x. Okay, and then I'm going to distribute here. So now I have 2x plus 2 times 5 is 10. 2 times x is 2x equals 10. And now I have to solve just like we did before. 2x and 2x equals 4x plus 10. That equals 0, or that equals 10. Now I subtract 10 from each side. Now that gets me 0. So I have 4x equals 0. Divide by 4, divide by 4. I figure out x equals 0. Okay, so to figure out x for this problem was a little bit more work, but to figure out y shouldn't be too bad, because I'm going to use this bottom equation now, and I know y equals 5 plus x. And we just found out x was 0. So y equals 5 plus 0. And 5 plus 0 is 5. So we figured out x was 0 and y is 5. Okay, since I kind of ran out of room there, let's look at number 4. Actually, let's look at number 5, since this one says x equals. So again, if it says x equals or it says y equals, there's no difference. I just want to show you. So here I have 2x, and here I have x equals 3y plus 5. So I'm going to take out this x here and put in a 3y plus 5, because that's what x equals. So instead of saying 2x, I'm going to do 2 and then do my parentheses and do 3y plus 5. And I'm going to do the rest of the problem. So plus y equals 3. And same thing, I'm going to distribute here. So 2 times 3y is 6y. 2 times 5 is 10. Plus y equals 3. All right, same thing. Let me get my y's together here. So I get 7y plus 10 equals 3. To plus 10, so let me subtract 10. So I get 7y equals negative 7. Divide both sides by 7, so I end up with y equals negative 1. Then again, I know that x equals 3y plus 5. And we just figured out that y was negative 1. So now I'm going to go ahead and plug in negative 1 there to figure out what my x is. Well, 3 times negative 1 is negative 3, and negative 3 plus 5 is 2. So I got 2 answers. Negative 1 and 2 are my 2 answers. Okay, now let's do some of these that look like a little more difficult because they say y equals for both of them, but that kind of makes it a little easier. So since I know y and y are the same thing, right? Y equals y, they're both the same thing. That means I also know that 2x plus 8 and negative 2x are also the same thing because they both equal y. So I like these problems a lot more because they're a lot less work in my opinion, because we can just kind of get them together based off that. So let me get my x's together. So I'm going to subtract 2x from each side. So that cancels out. So I'm left with 8 equals negative 4x. Divide each side by negative 4. And I figure out that x equals a negative 2. So now that I know an x equals negative 2, I'm going to look at this bottom one. So I have y equals negative 2x. And I just figured out x is negative 2. So I'm going to put, instead of negative 2x, I'm going to put 2 times negative 2. So 2 times negative 2 is 4. So I figured out x equals negative 2 and y equals 4. Okay, let's look at this next one. Even though it has some fractions, pretty much the same thing. Y equals y. Those are the same, y and y. So then I know 3/4 x plus 1 is the same as 1/4 x plus 3. Since y and y are the same, that means those two are the same. So I'm going to get my variables together first. So subtract 1/4 x, subtract 1/4 x. 3/4 minus 1/4 is 2/4. It's the same thing as a half. Okay, now I got a plus 1, so I'm going to minus 1. So I got 2/4 x equals 3 minus 1 is 2. I'm going to divide both of these by 2/4. And 2 divided by 2/4 is the same as 4. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and plug in 4 for my x. Let's just do the bottom one here. So y equals 1/4 x plus 3. But remember, we know x is 4. So 1/4 times 4 plus 3. And 1/4 of 4 is 1. So 1 plus 3 is 4. So x equals 4 and y equals 4 for that last one. All right. And then like I said, on the first page, then we'll have some that none of them say x equals and none of them say y equals. So we got to do some work to figure out which one we can make to say x equals or y equals. And all the ones on your homework are 1 or 2 steps away. So like number 1, we pretty much have a choice. We can get it to say x equals or y equals. It doesn't really matter because both the x and the y don't have anything in front of them. But like another one, like number 17, I would definitely get this one to say y equals because it's only 1 step away. We would only need to add 4x to each side or add 5x if you wanted to get the top one. I wouldn't, try to get this one to say x equals because then that's a lot more work. Okay, so this top one, number 10, let's make it say y equals. So x plus y equals 3. So I wanted to say y equals, so I'm going to subtract x from each side. So I get y equals 3 minus x. So again, I'm going to take that y equals, I'm going to take out this y, and I just figured out y equals 3 minus x. So I'm going to take 2x plus 4, and not 4y anymore, but I'm going to put in 3 minus x. So taking out the y, substituting in the 3 minus x. Then I'm going to distribute. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times x is 4x. It's a negative 4x because it's a negative x. And then I'm going to combine my x's here. So I'm going to get negative 2x plus 12 equals 8. Subtract 12 from each side, subtract 12 from each side. So I'm left with negative 2x equals a negative 4. So we'll divide both sides by negative 2. So I get x equals a positive 2. And now again, to figure out y isn't going to be too bad because we have this equation right here. So y equals 3 minus x, and we just figured out that x was 2. So y equals 3 minus 2, and 3 minus 2 is 1. So in this problem, x equals 2, and y equals 1. All right, let's look at this last one down here that I referenced before, number 17. So I'm going to get this top part to say y equals. So y minus 5x equals negative 2. So I'm going to add 5x to both sides so that I can get it to say y equals. So y equals 5x minus 2. So now it says y equals. I'm going to put that in. So negative 4x plus y. So this time we don't have a number in front of the y. So I can just put in the 5x minus 2. And that equals 2. So I got to get my x's together. So negative 4x plus 5x is just x minus 2 equals 2. Add 2 to both sides. So I figure out x equals 4. So now that x equals 4, this is the tougher part for this problem because now I got to plug that in. Let's do the top one again. So y minus 5x equals negative 2. So if I know x equals 4, I can do 5 times 4 there. So 5 times 4 is 20 equals negative 2. It's a minus 20. So I can add 20 to each side. So negative 2 plus 20 is 18. So I figure out my x equals 4 and my y equals 18. So kind of like I said there, it's a little different when you're doing the math. Trying to get the y equals does make it a little more complicated, as you can see from this problem.